of housekeeping things. Number one, this webcast is being recorded and will make its way to our YouTube channel. We'll go over that towards the end of the webcast, YouTube channel that is, but just to let everybody know the webcast is being recorded so you could point your friends and other Fusion users to it even at a later point. If you have any questions as we're going through this content, feel free to type them into the question and answer panel. I am starting to get some excited users talking there, so hello right back at you, and thank you for joining your very first Fusion webinar. We hope you'll come back for more. If you have any other questions as we're going through the content, feel free to type them into the question and answer panel. I am a one-man band today, so I'll be showing you the product as well as administering the questions and answers, so we'll probably go over them verbally, but I'll try to stop from time to time and take a look at the question and answer panel as best I can. All right, fantastic. Somebody give me a yes if you can still see my screen and if you see a lampshade. Awesome. Awesome, awesome. Woohoo. Okay, so welcome to Fusion for Beginners. The understanding here is that most of you are very, very new to Fusion and are sort of just learning, looking for a get started type quick content. So that's what the audience is that this webcast is geared towards. If you feel like you're an intermediate or slightly more advanced user, we do go into specific topics that are more advanced. So definitely feel free to go back to our website to take a look at that as well. But welcome to the webcast, and by the end of the 60 minutes, or hopefully a little bit less, we'll have a nice lampshade designed for each one of you. So before I get started with the designing process, let me give you a quick overview of the interface that you see. So this is what Fusion 360 looks like. Right up top here is you have sort of a number of icons. You have your data panel, which if you click sort of brings up this sidebar on the left that puts you in front of all of your projects. So any projects that you started in Fusion by yourself or something that you've shared with other users show up here, right? As we all know, Fusion is a cloud-based collaborative tool, and this is how we share projects with each other. So we create a new project, we add people to it, and then everybody in that project can access the data in there. So these are your new projects. So if you go look for a specific data set or a design you're working on, you could come in here and then look for something else that you might have worked on. So I designed a corkscrew a few months ago in Fusion, so go back and find that, or anything else I might have worked on in the past that I placed in this project. All right. So with that, that's the data panel. There's several other icons here. So your very typical file icon where you'd start a new design. This is also where you would go to start a new drawing, and a few other things like export or share a file with somebody else, or 3D print, etc. There's the save icon, the trusted floppy disk that will save your file. Once you do save it, you can, this one is a previously saved version, so it allows me to put in a comment. I'm basically just putting in an additional version file. If I was saving it for the first time, it would prompt me to put in what project this file is saved into, and then that would be the project that it would live in, again, back here into your data panel. And my favorite, the undo button, also famously known as the regret button, as well as the redo, should you need to go there. So that's some of your typical tools. Right down here we have all of your modeling tools and different workspaces. If you have more than one file open, they will be available on the top here as tabs. These are your modeling tools. So you have several different workspaces. First of all, we're going to start in the modeling workspace. It says model right here, but you have other options. You have the patch workspace, which would be more for surfacing type stuff. You have the render workspace. We'll go into this today as well. But this is what you would use to create really neat looking realistic renderings of your designs. You have the animation workspace, so should you ever need to put together an animation that shows things like, for example, assembly and disassembly instructions, service instructions for your tools. Think of IKEA catalogs and how easy it would be to put IKEA furniture together if they just gave you a step-by-step video. You can do that with your designs here using the animation workspace. There's a simulation workspace, so you can do some basic simulation testing on your designs, make sure things are strong enough and they function exactly how they're designed to function. And finally, CAM. This is where you set up a certain part to be machined, you set up the toolpath for CNC, and then you basically hit go to create those parts. So those are the workspaces that you have. Right within the model workspace, so really quickly, when you change from one workspace to the next, this entire ribbon on the top changes as well. So all the tools and commands that are made available will be relevant to the workspace that you're in. So if you ever come across a situation where the ribbon on top, the tools are not recognizable, just make sure that you're in the right workspace that you need to be. The model workspace is certainly my favorite and also extremely, is probably used the most of all the workspaces. Let's just put it that way. It has a bunch of tools on top to get you going. So the first thing I'm going to say is if your ribbon bar right on top does not look exactly like mine, I might have a few additional tools in here. It's only because I use them frequently enough to add them. So if I use the loft command a lot, I would simply click this arrow and that would add it to the toolbar, and that's how mine is customized. So I don't want that to throw you off. If I wanted to take it off, I would just hit the X and it would go back off. You'll see why these tools are added to my toolbar because we will use them over and over again, this specific exercise. How you design in Fusion might be a little bit different from how I design in Fusion, so everybody's toolbar is completely customizable. Right within here, your commands are broken up by categories. So create would be tools that you would use to create geometry, pretty self-explanatory. Modify are tools you would use to modify the geometry you've already created. We'll be using a lot of tools from both of these drop-downs. An assemble is something that you would use to start specifying relationships between two different components in your design. So start defining joints or constraints, as they might be called in different CAD products. The sketch tools, again, this is something we'll be using a lot in this specific class. It basically is tools you need to set up 2D sketches. And then there's a certain other tools that are made available to you as well. So you can inspect a certain design in several different ways. Measure would be a neat, simple one. You can use construction geometry to better design or better use features in your design to reference off of. You could insert decals, different types of files. This is where you could send directly to a 3D printer or get quotes from other service partners we have. You could write add-ins for Fusion scripts, etc. And then we have some selection filters as well. So you could do, based on what geometry you're looking to work with, you could select different things. The selection filters is something that I'm just going to point out here because as soon as you've had a couple of days of work in Fusion, you'll start running into this, and it's good to know where it's at. So under selection, there's selection filter, and just as soon as your geometry starts to get more complicated, you'll need to start using these. So if you basically said, I only want to select bodies or I only want to select sketch curves or sketch components, you can check this so that the noise reduces as you're hovering over your geometry and trying to choose a specific thing. So for example, if I wanted to pick a specific body, go back here and make sure we select all. So I wanted to select this entire wooden body at the bottom, and now if I hover over it, it's going to give me several different selections. That filleted surface, the flat surface, it selects edges, but it's not selecting the entire body for me. Now there's several different ways for me to get around that. One of the ways is to simply come into selection filters and check bodies and then go back and select it, and that selects the entire body. So just wanted to mention that. We won't be using it a lot today, but something when we, as you start using Fusion for a few days, that might come in handy. On the left here is your browser. This is basically a list of all the bodies, components, sketches, etc., and a lot of other information related to your model or your design. So that starts showing up here on the left. If you are sharing this design with anybody else, you can exchange comments here. So somebody could say, could you make sure that the base is a little bit wider, and leave a comment, and you would be able to see it here under comments. Down on the horizontal is your timeline. This is basically, when the timeline is turned on, it basically means that you have a parametric model. What I mean by that is you can actually go back in time and change aspects of the model. With a timeline, you could actually roll back time and figure out how this specific design was created, right? How it went from one feature to the next. So you can do that with the timeline, but you can also roll the timeline and then make an edit back when a certain extrusion was made, change the shape, and then come back to now on the timeline, and that feature would be propagated across the length of the timeline, right? So this is where it's kind of like hitting record as you design, and all of your steps are captured, and you can go back and start to try to edit it. So I can edit this feature, and instead of 25, I could make it 20, and then go ahead and say OK, and that changes what the design of that lamp looks like, right? So if I fill it too much, I could fill it a little bit less and go with it that way. All right, super. Let me show you some navigation tools, because this is typically what trips people up when they get started. I have a mouse that has a left click, a right click, and the wheel in the middle. If you press and hold the wheel, it'll show you the hand icon, which is also pan. So you could just click and drag, hold and drag the middle mouse button or the wheel, and that's your pan. If you scroll the wheel in and out, that's your zoom. So those are the two important ones to know. The other big one is if you hold down Shift and the mouse button, middle mouse button, so hold down Shift and the middle mouse button, you'll see that icon that looks like almost two orbits. And if you drag that around, that's sort of like how you look around your 3D design, right? So you hold that middle mouse button down along with Shift, and if you just drag your mouse left to right, you can, orbit your around your tool, around your design, and be able to look at it from whatever angle you need to. Another way to get to it is the orbit command is right here at the bottom. It brings up sort of the circle and the same little, your mouse turns into the same little graphic, and then you can click and drag to get the same effect. There's also a pan button right at the bottom that does the same thing, a zoom button that also does the same thing. But if you're looking for keyboard shortcuts or mouse shortcuts, that would be it. So one more time, hold the middle mouse button down and keep holding it and drag it for pan. Scroll the middle mouse button in and out for zoom, and hold down Shift and hold down the middle mouse button, and that's your orbit command. Okay, super. Hopefully that was pretty clear, and we should be ready to get started. Somebody give me a yes if that was pretty clear. I don't see any questions in the question and answer panel so far other than a bunch of yeses. Awesome, you guys rock. Is there 3D mouse support? Yes, absolutely there is. I was using a 3D Connection mouse with my Fusion for the longest time. There absolutely is 3D mouse support, and those work really, really well. Super. Okay, so let's get started. I'm going to move my lamp off to the side a little bit. This is just, we're going to keep this up here just as reference, and let's start a new design. So I'm going to start a brand new design, blank slate, and let's start modeling this lamp. So the first thing I'm going to model is this solid wooden base feature, right? So there's several different ways in which I can do it. I'm going to go to the Create menu and use one of the primitives. So I can basically draw a cylinder in the Create menu from scratch, right? So I'm going to use the cylinder primitive because it's essentially it lets me define two things in one command. It lets me define the radius or diameter of the cylinder, and it also lets me define the height of the cylinder. Otherwise, this would be two steps: one to draw a circle to define the radius, and the second to extrude that circle. Okay, so I'm going to use the cylinder. Before I do that, I want to make sure that my units is in millimeters, just because that's how we're going to do it in this class today. So let's change your units to millimeters, say OK, and right here in your browser, the units will say millimeters. If you want to follow along in inches, that's totally fine too. The dimensions don't have to be extremely accurate, so you can approximate them in inches as well if you so choose. All right, so let's go back to the cylinder. And if you hold your mouse still for a second, and if any of you have used AutoCAD in the past, you probably have muscle memory to look at the command line and see what input it's asking you for. So as soon as I hit the cylinder command and I hold my mouse still, what you see right next to your mouse is kind of like a command line. It's telling you what the next selection you make needs to be. So the first thing is select a plane or a planar surface. I want to select this horizontal plane or flat plane as the surface to sketch on for this cylinder. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Again, the mouse says place center point, and if your mouse is not showing that glyph, you just need to take your hand away from it for a second and it'll come up. So place center point, I'm going to place it right at the origin. Then I'm going to drag out. I can either drag specifically, so you'll see it goes up in increments and then it sort of snaps to certain specific sizes. I can, let's just snap anywhere. I'm not going to make this approximate. And as soon as I click, left click, you see a cylinder come up. You could do two things. You could change the diameter here in the cylinder menu, or you could continue to drag this arrow to change the diameter. So go ahead and make this 200 millimeters, either by typing it in here or by typing it in here. And the second thing you want to do is drag the vertical arrow, and it increases in increments, and you want to make this base 50 millimeters. I'm going to scroll this mouse wheel to zoom out just a little bit. So the model's in the center of my screen. And you might want to do that depending on how far zoomed in you were in the beginning. And once you're done, that cylinder looks good to me. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. So there's the basic cylinder that we're going to start with. The next thing I'm going to do is you see that there's an angle on this cylinder that the lamp arm is rested on. I'm going to go ahead and create that angle. So I'm going to use a modify tool, and it's called draft. So I can basically specify a draft as in specify an angle to a plane. The first selection it's asking me to make is a parting plane. That would be the plane towards which the face rotates or away from which it rotates. You'll see in a second. I want to pick one of the vertical planes. Let's pick the one on the right. Notice as I hover over it to pick it, it's picking the top surface of the cylinder that we just drew. So this is a neat trick that you're going to be using quite a bit going forward. So watch closely. Left mouse button, click and hold. And you can leave it once this menu comes up. So left mouse button, click and hold, and that brings up the select other tool. So it's basically going to select anything else that might be a legitimate selection based on where you clicked and held the mouse. So in this case, I want to select the work plane. And you see that it selects that work plane for you. You see that with the arrow. I'm going to do this one more time just so everybody gets it. This was an important one and a tool you'll be using often. So the select other tool is something you can use in any command or outside of any command even. So if I were to turn on the origin to go back and do the same thing, again, I'm not within a command right now. I just want to show you the left mouse button, click and hold. So if I wanted to select that vertical plane, left mouse button, click and hold, and brings up the select other menu. You can leave the left mouse button once this menu comes up and just pick the work plane. And that would select it. Notice the other ones are slightly more yellow than the vertical work plane is that I selected. So I'm going to hit escape to unselect that or click outside somewhere. So modify, draft. Let's do this one more time. The other thing you can do to select that plane is if you zoom way out, the origin scales up. So you can just go ahead and select it. That would be another way to do it if your middle mouse button for some reason is not working or if that trick didn't work for you. So the second selection there is select faces to draft. For that, I'm going to pick the top face of this cylinder. And you'll notice this little circle comes up with an orbit. So basically, I'm just going to drag it to 10 degrees, or I could type in 10 degrees under the angle. Once I'm done, I can hit OK on the draft dialog box. I can also right-click and hit OK here. So while I'm on this right-click, a quick note about right-clicking while using Fusion. It's sort of like an in-context menu. So depending on the command that you're in or the selection that you've made, the right-click menu keeps changing. But right-click into the right is always okay. Right-click into the left is always cancel. And these are some things that will come with muscle memory, and so they turn into gestures a little bit more than right-click and looking for the OK and clicking as well. So there you go. There's your draft. Again, holding down Shift and the middle mouse button to orbit to be able to show you what that draft angle looks like. I'm going to turn off the visibility off the origin, which you can simply do by clicking the light bulbs next to it. Again, you can do that for the bodies that you've created as well. So you could turn on and off the visibility of bodies by doing that. Awesome. The next thing I want to do is actually want to take the height of this down a little bit. And there's a neat direct modification tool in Fusion called Press Pull, and it can be used on several different things. So the first thing I'm going to use Press Pull on is this face. I can select the face first and then hit Press Pull and just go down 5 millimeters. So notice in this case it's snapping to 10. If I just zoom in a tad and go back down, it'll go to 5. So the incremental snaps for any operation that you're doing are dependent on your zoom. Just a neat trick there. So if something is not snapping to smaller increments, you just need to zoom in a little bit. So I'm going to take it down about 5 millimeters and hit OK. Again, it was just looking a little bit chunkier than I had planned, so let's do that. The last thing I'm going to do again is select the edge, right-click, and hit Repeat Press Pull as well. In the right-click context menu, the option that's to the top is always repeat the previous command that you ran. So I'm going to repeat Press Pull, and in this case, if I press it down, say 15, that will be a fillet instead of a pressed face, right? So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And that's the base of your lamp. Hopefully that made sense. Everybody with me so far? I don't see any other questions after that. Awesome. Okay. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start designing the arm of this lamp. So if I look at it from the right side, I notice that the arm follows a specific profile. Again, based on the design methodology, there's several different ways that you could go after this arm. Here's just one way in which to do it. As I pointed out the user interface, I failed to point out here on the right is your view cube. So your home view is always an isometric view that shows you top, front, and right. But you can also click on a specific view, so front or right, to be able to look at the design in that orientation. You could click a corner to view an isometric view, or you could click an edge to look at it from that specific edge. So again, super handy in terms of being able to navigate your model. So here we are at the right view, the way we wanted to look at it. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start creating a sketch. You can simply do this by going to the line command on Sketch. If I hold my mouse over this without clicking it, it shows you a little description of what the line command does, as well as how to go about creating a line, right? So if you're ever stuck or have a question about how a command works, simply go ahead and just hover over command and it will give you more details. Some of them even have little GIFs, or the images are dynamic, so it shows you a little video preview of how to use a command as well. Line is pretty straightforward, so I'm going to go ahead and hit line. But guess what? I haven't specified a sketch plane yet, right? I just went ahead and hit line. So it's going to ask me for a sketch plane. I want to sketch on this plane that is square in front of me. So I'm simply going to go ahead and select it. Now, one of the things that I want to do is I can start building a line, but I want some reference geometry off of the geometry that I already see. I want this line to be joined to this geometry or referenced off of this geometry. So in your sketch command, there's a project tool. The keyboard shortcut for it is P. So anything that you want a keyboard shortcut for, those are written right in front of them, of the tool. So in this case, project geometry P. Project geometry is a command I use a lot. So basically what it does is I've added it to the top of my toolbar, right? That's my project geometry. So the other way to start a brand new sketch would be to use the create sketch command, but you could also click any of the commands in the sketch toolbar and that would create a sketch as well. and then take you directly within that command. Hopefully that helps answer your question, James. You could do it either way. Awesome. Project geometry. So project geometry, and I want to project this top angled line, just this edge. Quick follow-up question. When would you use create sketch? You could have used it in this situation as well. So you could have used create sketch and picked the plane that you wanted to sketch on, and then gone ahead and picked the kind of geometry that you wanted to start with. You could do that, or you could just pick the kind of geometry that you want to start with as well. If you're not sure what direction you'll be taking in your sketch creation, if you're going to draw a circle first, or a line, or a rectangle, you could definitely do create sketch and start there. What is the point of create sketch? Definitely to start creating a sketch. So a lot of times you don't know what your first command within the sketch is. So that's when you would create it. Again, it's a command that's not sort of occupying a lot of space on your browser. So I typically find myself creating a sketch with the line command and then just getting into it. In this situation, I did exactly that. I created a sketch with the line command, but I never really used the line command, so it's a little bit redundant. But if you want to be a little bit better about it, you could go ahead and click on create sketch. Again, clicking on any of these would do it, but if you don't know what the first thing is that you're going to do as soon as you create sketch, that's when you would go ahead and create sketch and then think about, either projecting geometry, or do I need to draw a circle, or what is the first thing I need to do? That's when you would use it. Hopefully that explains a little bit. So as soon as I project geometry, that shows this purple line up here, and that is essentially projected on the sketch. So I projected this round edge right on my sketch plane. Hopefully that makes sense. Go ahead and hit OK as soon as I'm done projecting. Let's go back to the right side view so we're looking straight at the sketch. I'm going to go into the line command, and I want to make sure the line starts at where the projected geometry is. So if I hover over that projected geometry, it shows me a blue X, and that means that they're going to be coincident or collinear when I start the line, right? So I want to start the line somewhere here. Again, you can approximate it. I want to go straight up vertically. Notice when I'm perfectly vertical, there's a little cyan glyph or blue glyph that shows me that it's perfectly vertical, and it's applying that constraint as I go about it. Notice if I type something in right now, it's going to be in the length of the line window. So I want this to be 200. Let's make it 225. And again, just click to place the line. The second thing that you can do is zoom out a little bit, and then I want to place another line. This one is 100 millimeters long, and if I hit tab, it goes to the angle. It's going to say 45 degrees, and hit click. Just click your mouse button to finish. And the third line, I'm going to end it back at that projected line. And notice I can hover along the line and it'll be coincident, but at a certain point it snaps and the little cyan glyph shows me that it's perpendicular. Hopefully you can all see that. And when I see that it is perpendicular, that's when I want to click to finish the creation of that line. Now I'm still in the line tool. I can hit escape, I can right click and hit OK. Either one of those work. As soon as you have a closed loop sketch, it sort of turns into this amber color. Which is showing you that it's closed. So if ever you're trying to extrude something and the sketch didn't turn amber, it means that you don't have a closed sketch and there might be a little opening somewhere that you haven't seen. I'm going to go to the question answer panel really quickly and try to answer this one. Is it possible to create a new sketch using reference points from different sketches in different planes? Yes, Paulo. You can absolutely do that. The way to do it would be to, again, project geometry. The geometry that you project could be geometry on other sketches. It could be lines, arcs, edges in existing geometry otherwise. So essentially what you're doing is taking that geometry on a different plane and projecting it onto your sketch plane. And once you have that, you can start referencing it and using that to build your sketch off of. So you can absolutely do that. Awesome. Well, this sketch is done. It's pretty well defined, so I'm just going to go ahead and hit stop sketch. The next thing I want to do is I want to extrude this in both directions. So that would be the little extrude button under create. So under the create drop-down, you could hit extrude. Again, this is a commonly used command, so it's a keyboard shortcut. You could just type in E to extrude as well. So to be able to extrude, I'm going to click that profile that we just built. I want it to be extruded a total of 25 millimeters. Notice it does that. I actually want it to be 25 millimeters on both sides. So I want it to be a symmetric extrusion. That's 25 millimeters on each side. So it's a total of 50. Just want to make sure that that's clear to everybody. That's how the distance and symmetry work. And instead of a join, I want this to be a new body because it's a separate body from the base. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. All right, so that's a quick beginning of what the arm of the lampshade might look like. It's not looking a lot like this final lampshade, but trust me, we will get there very quickly. The first thing I want to do is I want to click this bottom edge of the geometry that we just drew, and I'm going to go ahead and hit press pull to create a fillet, 25 millimeter fillet. Go ahead and hit OK. Guess what? There's actually also a fillet tool I could use. So you could type in F for fillet, or under modify, go to the fillet command, pick this edge, and let's look at how much we want this fillet to be. 50 looks good. Right click, say OK. All right. The next step would be to cut out all the geometry that doesn't compose that arm. So that's what I'm going to go ahead and do. Again, it's one of the workflows you can use to build that arm. You could use several different ones, but that's what I'm going to go ahead and do, since it's really easy at this point to offset the sketch that I've already built. I want to go ahead and click on this front face, right click, and say create sketch. This is a good example of where I would use create sketch right within the context menu as well. So click on a face, right click, and create sketch. And the next thing that I want to do is I want to offset. Again, there's a keyboard shortcut there. So offset this end edge, or the edge that goes all around it. You could hover over it, click it, and that gives me an offset of however much I want. I can drag these blue arrows to be able to change that. So I want an offset of -5. I'm going to go ahead and say OK. The other thing I want is I want to delete that tall vertical line for the offset, and I'm going to go ahead and use the extend command to extend these small lines to that one line that was ended up being projected. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and delete that vertical line and extend the smaller lines. I could hit escape to exit that command. So what I want to do now is cut out all the geometry except this loop. So I could use the extrude command. Again, several different options. I could use the press pull. Let's use the extrude. Really doesn't make a difference. If I pull the arrow extruded this way, notice it's joining geometry to my existing design, but I want to go back the other way. As soon as I do, my preview turns red, and it's showing me that it's cutting out geometry to the other end. So either I could extend it all the way through, and I know that that's definitely going to cut it, or I could simply click on this face, and that extrudes it exactly to that face, precisely, right? Why would you do this versus extending it all the way through? If you think that you would ever change your design in the future, or the of this arm, or the width, I guess, of this arm, that would be the 25 millimeter symmetric extrude we just did. If you think you might want to go back and make it 30, this will make sure that it's always extruded to the end of that width. Again, you could do the same thing by just simply dragging the arrow away past the arm, and that might give you or in most cases, it'll give you the same result, right? When you're done, right-click, say OK, and notice that it cuts away all of the geometry that you didn't need. We're starting to get close. The next thing I'm going to do, and this is a small change, is I'm going to sketch on this surface. So I'm going to click this flat plane here, right-click, and say Create Sketch. I want this little geometry to be completely perpendicular. So I'm going to draw a line that starts about there, and that meets the parallel line above it at a perpendicular angle. So if it doesn't meet at a perpendicular angle, my purpose going to put it a little bit away from there because I want to show you how to add the perpendicular constraint to that geometry. So if it's not perfectly perpendicular, you could simply go ahead and on the sketch palette, apply one of the constraints to it. In this case, we want a perpendicular constraint. So pick this line first, this line second, and notice it snaps, and that little glyph right there shows me that it's perpendicular. So go ahead and say OK. The next thing I want to do is pick this closed loop, right-click, say Extrude. Remember when I said that your right-click menu, the in-context menu, always shows the options that are available when you have selected a certain piece of geometry? So again, if I've selected this, these should be my options, which are quite apparent. And it's making it easy for you it's making it simpler in terms of mouse travel, so you don't have to travel a lot, as well as all of the options you need are right on your fingertips. Again, drag the other way to be able to cut that little triangle off, or just click on that face to be able to cut to that face. Once you're done, go ahead and say OK. All right, the last thing for the arm, and then we're going to stop for questions, look at questions in the question answer panel. So if you have any, this would be a good time to start typing them in. So I'm going to do a bunch of fillets. Modify, fillet. I'm going to fillet this edge here at the bottom, this little edge here as well. Again, never hesitate to use your zoom. And these two edges on top. Now, since the radius on all of these fillets will be exactly the same, I've gone ahead and selected all of them together. And then you can just drag your arrow and take a look at what fillet might look good. In this case, I want a 25mm fillet. So when I have that, happy with it, you can go ahead and say OK. All right, so there's your base and there's your arm. Starting to look a lot like a lamp. We'll go through quickly changing appearances so that it looks a lot more like this one that I built, or whatever you want your custom lamp to look like as well. So I'm going to pause here for a second. Everybody good with where we are? Any questions? Give me a yes and or a question, and we can move forward. Awesome. Super. I'm looking at the questions that were asked previously, and it looks like we've answered most of them, except I just got a screen is stuck in some sort of skeleton mode. How can I make it look solid? Is it possible that you change your visual style to wireframe like that? So right at the bottom here, if you go to display settings, you could choose visual style, change it to shaded with visible edges only. That might help. Let's also make sure that you're in the model environment and not in a different one. Hopefully that sorted it out. Okay. Let's keep going. So the next thing we're going to do is, oh, super, that solved it. Awesome. The next thing we're going to do is let's go ahead and create the lamp shade, this little lampshade itself. And this is where you can get quite creative and use the power of the sculpting tools in Fusion. So this little purple cube that you see here is the Create Form dialog, and also a ton of power on your fingertips. So this is where you can really start getting into organic shapes. This is where the T-spline technology has been integrated into Fusion, and it really gives you the power to be able to sculpt and surface to your heart's content and make things look exactly the way you want them to look. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that purple cube. It says Create Form, and that puts me in the Sculpt workspace. And I actually go back to my model being created out. And what I want to be able to do is I want to start to use a primitive to create that initial shade, and then I can start modifying it. So I want to create, again, let's pick a cylinder. And I want to create it on this inside face of the lamp's arm. Hopefully that makes sense. So you can just go ahead and click on that face. Now you'll notice that I'm not looking square at this face, and I can try to look better at it. Or what else? The other thing I could do is at the bottom here is a look at tool. And basically what it does is it orients the design so you're looking square at a specific face. So I'm going to say look at and pick that face, and immediately my part orients so that I'm looking square at that face. So what I want to do in this situation is I'm drawing a cylinder. It says specify center point. So I can hover over this middle line. Again, notice it's snapping to it. And I hover over till my little glyph next to my mouse is a cyan circle. And that basically is telling me that it's concentric with the fillets that we had created on the arm, or the circle around it. That's what I want. I want it to be concentric. And I can go ahead, click to place the center, and another click to place the diameter of the cylinder. I'm going to type in 30 because that's what I want. Don't hit enter, click to finish. If you hit enter, it sort of exits you from the command, which is not what we want to do. So click to finish. I'm going to drag this arrow down a little bit to elongate the cylinder. If you drag the horizontal arrow outwards, that would change the diameter of the cylinder, which we don't want to do. Notice how there are 1, 2, 3, 4 faces along the height of the cylinder. So I want to change that to more. Let's change it to 6. Basically, the more faces that you have, the more control you'll have on the geometry. That's how much you'll be able to modify it. Diametrically, it says I have 8 faces, which works just fine. I'm not going to be changing it. It's going to be pretty symmetrical around the diameter, so I can leave that as is, or even take it down if I'd like. Once I'm happy with what my cylinder looks like, I can go ahead and say OK. The next thing I want to do is I want to start modifying the geometry of this cylinder. So let's start having fun with it. You could pick a specific face, or hold down Control and pick multiple faces. You could pick an edge, or you could pick a point. So let's start with picking a point. And this is the modify tool, or the edit form tool, potentially one of the most powerful commands in this workspace. Don't do what I'm doing, just watch me for a second. I'm actually going to undo out of all of this. I just want to show you how the edit form tool works. So in this case, let's pick a face, edit form. It brings us this triad, which has arrows and 3 axes, has a lot of control points. It has these little planes I can click and drag. So basically, if I were to drag an arrow, that sort of pulls the surface with me while maintaining the continuity on that surface as well. So I could pull it in more than one direction. That's what I was looking for. I could scale it up or down. I could scale it outwards. I could pull one of these planes and drag it that way. I can change the angle of the surface. So this is essentially a triad of a lot of control points. Now, I have no idea why you would ever want to do that with a lampshade, but my point being that all of these different little things have a lot of control, and they can help you edit your form as you might need to edit it. Okay? So let's escape out of all of that. We don't want any of those changes. Make sure we got everything. Okay. So now, here's a neat trick. What I do want to be able to do is I want to scale up each one of these vertical edges. So, for example, let's pick this middle edge. I can either click on an edge to pick one edge, or double click on an edge, and that picks all the edges around it. Once I have that, I can click on the center of the triad, and if I drag in one direction or another, it either scales it up or it scales it down. So let's scale it up a little bit. Again, I'm not being precise here. I'm just sort of experimenting with what I want my design to look like. Click on a different edge, start scaling. In this case, let's have it come out kind of like that. That's what I want my lampshade to look like. So you can start playing with this. The one that I have on the previous design that I built was going in. Again, that works too. You could just pick the edge use the Edit Form tool and have it scale in instead of scaling out. Again, I have these edges scaled up as well. I just want this one to be a little bit different. So let's go ahead and do that. Again, this is where your creative control comes into play, and you can go ahead and start using that to sculpt that lampshade. Whenever you're done with the sculpting, all you need to do is go ahead and say Finish Form. And now what we have is, this is a surface that is amber on one side, gray on the other, which is basically it's telling us it's not a solid yet, it's a surface. So I want to go ahead and be able to thicken that surface. Here's the thicken command under Create. As soon as you hit Finish Form, you put back in the model environment, you can go ahead and say thicken, pick that surface, and then pick how much you want to thicken it by. In this case, it's thickening it outwards by 2 millimeters. That sounds good to me. Go ahead and hit OK. There's your lampshade. All right, we're getting super close. The last thing we're going to do is apply some appearances to our lampshade and go ahead and render it. So let's come back into our different workspaces, pull that drop down, and go ahead and pick Render. So it immediately puts you in the render environment. You'll notice that a lot of the settings up top have changed, and you have much fewer options, much simpler environment. You can either go ahead and pick Appearance, or pick your physical material and scene settings and all the fun stuff like that. So I'm going to pick Appearance just because I kind of really like that option over physical materials, and it gives me more options than the options that I'm more comfortable with under Appearance. But if you did want your physical material selected to affect volume and center of gravity and mass and stuff like that, you might be better off picking physical material. So under Appearance, you could go to Solid Wood and pick one of the appearances there. Let's look at mahogany. All right, so any of the options that you have that have an arrow at the end are basically downloadable materials. I can just click the arrow, download the material, barely took a second, and then I can click and drag it over the material that I have in Fusion. There you go, beautiful mahogany. Again, when it says wood is solid, that means it's 3D wood. Notice how the grain of the wood aligns to the different faces that the wood is, the body is made out of, so as if it was actually carved out of a solid block of wood. It looks really, really neat. I want some sort of glass for the lampshade. Let's look at smooth glass. Let's make this one red, just because we're going crazy here. And I want some sort of metal for my arm. So I can go with bronze, gold, iron, silver, stainless, titanium. Let's start with aluminum. See where we get. Do a rougher finish, anodized. Maybe polished. That looks a little bit better. All right, so let's say you're finalized picking what your materials look like. Oh, let's say satin. Maybe we're not finalized. Go back to polished. Okay, once you're done picking what your materials look like, go ahead and close the Appearance menu. And then you can do one of two things. You could enable ray tracing, which would render this on your screen. Again, the maximum, it would render it as it would render it at the resolution of your screen right now. So if you have a nice big screen, you would get a beautiful rendering, right? But if you wanted to render it at a capacity higher than the current resolution of your screen, you would use the cloud rendering environment. So it's telling me I need to save my design. So if we go ahead and hit Save, Lamp, Project, pick what project it sits within. If you don't like where this is, you could pick one of the other projects. I'm totally fine with where it's saving it. Go ahead and save. Let's use the, says it's uploading. So let's give it a minute. Let's wait for the design to finish uploading to the cloud. In the meantime, let's enable ray tracing. So what that does is it starts the render. And what I would recommend is as you're setting up the render that you do it under the quick render setting. Normal would take a little bit longer, and advanced would take longer as well. How this works is that it keeps going through iterations of the ray tracing engine, and it refines itself with every iteration. With a simple design like this one, you'll notice that after about 25 iterations, it basically levels off, and there isn't significant improvement between how it's looking. So at that point, you could pause it and then save an image of your rendering. If you do want it to keep going, you could definitely have Fusion running and go do something else on your computer, check email, etc., and then come back and take a look and see if you like how it looks. This is really neat. The aluminum that we picked sort of has a nice reflection of the wood in it. I think it's coming out great. Plus how the light reflects off the wood is really neat as well. You pause it, save an image, and then you can go ahead and say OK, and then save it to either a project in Fusion, or you can save it to a local folder on your computer. I'm not going to save it for now. Let me go ahead and close out of here. That is a beautiful looking rendering. One last thing, you can set up your scene. So scene settings in Fusion as well. You could change the background. So instead of a solid color, you could have it be an environment. You could pick what environment you want it to be from the environment library. Again, lots of things to play with. You could attach custom environments. We're kind of running out of time, so I'm not going to go over that. You can add reflections to your design, so that will put a glossy surface under it where you can start seeing more reflections of what your design looks like. This is starting to look sharper and sharper. You could change the perspective on the camera. You could change focal length, etc. You could also add depth of field, which I think is brilliant. It basically lets you pick a point on your design and basically changes, which is the center of focus, and then it lets you change the blur on your rendering based on how much blur you set it up to be. So if you really cranked it up to maximum blur, it would really sharply focus on your center of focus, and everything else would be, that is out of that depth of field, would be quite a bit blurred. So you could go nuts with that. Once you're done, go ahead and hit close. You could let the render run. It is running currently, and then once you're ready, save an image out of it, like I just said. I think that looks really sharp. Let me look at the question answer panel. I'm happy to take questions for the next 5 minutes or so, make sure we've covered everything and given everybody a chance to ask questions. But that's essentially what I wanted to show you in Fusion 360. So a quick tutorial to set up your model, start designing some basic tools, as well as be able to show you how to start rendering. Quick question here, how do we know when the rendering finishes? The rendering actually never finishes. So like I said, it just keeps going through iterations, and every iteration will be sharper than the previous one, but you will realize that it tables off. So the image is not going to look any more sharp after a certain point, or not to the naked eye anyway. So right now it's rendering, for example. It's going through iterations, and you can see that I can't see a significant change in the sharpness of my model. So at that point, I can just simply stop, disable the ray tracing, and capture an image. So it essentially never stops. The next question is webinars about CAM. So let's quickly, I've had a couple of resources lined up to show you, so let's go do that very quickly. The first one is our YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, I highly recommend you do it. It's where we have a lot of basic content for beginners as well as advanced learners. So just go to youtube.com, click on Autodesk Fusion 360, or look for Autodesk Fusion 360, and there's a lot of content on there. And there's a lot of CAM content out there as well. So that might be a great place to start. Another great place is if you went to our website, and under community, if you went to community home or events. Events would be where the webinars are listed. So this is the community home. This also has the events. Let's go to the events web page. And this is, hopefully this is where you ran into these webinars. If it's not, this is where you can get to more of them. So next Tuesday is sculpting. The Tuesday after that is get started with SEA. One of these will be CAM. So we try to cover CAM on a regular basis. on a regular basis. Looks like we don't have any CAM scheduled for a while. But you also see other events on here. So NYC CNC training class. NYC CNC is a separate company that actually works closely with us and does a lot of CAM training. So if you look at it, you'll have a lot of different CAM training available if you sign up for the NYC CNC class here as well. And you can go ahead and register for it. There are also live events showing on this calendar. So basically what this is it's a live event in your city or close to where you are. You can go ahead and find it on the map and find more information about it here on this link. So we use meetup.com to schedule live events, and you can find one close to where you are. Or if you don't find one, reach out to us, and we're happy to help organize one or work with you to help organize one in your area and get Fusion users together to talk about the product. I know the schedule for these webcasts was put out to the team, and I did see CAM on it. It might be a couple months out, so I apologize for that. But just something to keep in mind is that typically these webinars do cover CAM. I'll take that feedback back to our team and say that there was a ask about CAM as well. The gallery. So on the Fusion webpage, if you went under Community and you went to Gallery, that will put you here. And this is a really neat page of, it's like kind of a content library of the stuff people have created using Fusion. And there's a huge, like breadth of designs that people have put up here, from extremely mechanical to extremely sculpted, beautiful renderings. There's just a whole lot of content up here. So whether you're looking to download the model, which in a lot of cases these are downloadable, or just looking for inspiration, this would be a really, really nice place to start looking. Highly recommend you go out to the gallery, and then as you do start using Fusion a little bit more, that you are putting content out to the gallery as well. Okay, that was my spiel. I'm going back to the question and answer panel again. There does not appear to be any intermediate webinars on modeling. We have some on specific topics like assemblies, like sculpting, etc. But if you're looking at a different topic, I see you were looking at CAM. I'll take that feedback back to the team, and we'll make sure to put something out on CAM. But if there's other specific topics, definitely let us know. Another great place that I would like to point you to is the Fusion forums. So if you come under Community, you could go to the forum. It's a highly engaged Fusion community, and you'll see that even if you're on that page for about 30 minutes. People are constantly asking questions and engaging with each other and answering questions. So if you are looking for specific topics on the webinars, this might be a great place to post as well. This is also where we post a lot of, how to best report issues, what does a product roadmap look like, etc. So a lot of good information is out here on the forums, and most of us technical folks are out here answering questions all the time as well. Okay, how do I change the rendering to 300 dpi? Let's take a look. So within Fusion, if you were to render on the cloud, I'm going to show you this, you could basically pick a render quality and then specify the depth and the height in terms of pixels of your rendering, and that is basically what you can go ahead and do. So an image size could be a certain resolution. Aspect ratio could be specific. You could change that if you like. You could change the file format to something that makes sense, and then go ahead and it'll tell you how many cloud credits it's going to use. So it's going to use 2 cloud credits, and you can go ahead and hit render when you have the right resolution settings up there. So it's telling me cloud rendering has started. I could open up the rendering gallery, and this is essentially, I believe, the cloud rendering that I just sent out. And it's going to use just a few minutes, maybe closer to 10, and give me back a nice full-size rendering, the 1920 by 968 that I just asked for, and I'm going to be able to download that image. It's not using my computer's resources to compute that information. It is, in fact, going out and using the resources on the cloud, so you're not locking up your computer to be able to do that, or spending hours doing it. It should just be a few minutes. Again, power of infinite computing, power of the cloud. Hopefully that answers that. Awesome. You are very welcome. Let me go back to this PowerPoint one more time so that you all have my contact information. Again, we're active on Twitter. That would be a great place to engage. We're active on the forums, another fantastic place to engage and interact with other Fusion users. I showed you the meetup page. If you forgot where to go, it's meetup.com, and just look for Fusion 360 in your area. If you don't see anything, again, reach out to me, and I'm happy to help start something in your area as well. So that Twitter handle is @Sashaline_Singh. Or if you wanted to email me, my email isn't up here, but it's my first name dot last name @autodesk.com. Fantastic. Thank you so much for making the time. I apologize we went a few minutes over, but hopefully it was all valuable information for everybody. Thank you for sticking around, and I'll take the feedback for future webinars back to our team and try to make sure we cover a lot of those topics as well. Thanks again. Have a great day.